Good morning and welcome to Entrepreneurs Hour, right here on WRFR 93.3 FM. Every week on Entrepreneurs Hour, we dive into stories of triumphs, challenges, and lessons learned, highlighting how local organizations and individuals are working together to foster a thriving business ecosystem right here in Knox County and beyond. Whether you're starting a business, growing one, or supporting the local entrepreneurial community, this show is exactly for you. Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Austin. I'm your host and president of Ardea, proud sponsor of this show. Ardea is located in Rockport, and we help small businesses and nonprofits with bookkeeping, large-scale accounting, payroll, payment solutions, and tax services. I'm also the president of the Rock Coast Entrepreneurs and a member of the NSBA Leadership Council, representing Maine small business community on a local, state, and national level. I created the show to help entrepreneurs navigate the complexities of running a small business by providing a platform where entrepreneurs can share their journeys and highlight some amazing partners in our region, showcasing the impactful ways they're helping small businesses and entrepreneurs succeed. Let's learn, inspire, and support one another as we continue to build a stronger small business community together. Now, let's get started with today's show. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Entrepreneurs Hour. I'm having a case of the Mondays on a Tuesday, but happy to get started. I have someone who I met several years ago, matter of fact, in 2018, as a new entrepreneur myself. This guest, she opened her doors and gave me her business, which was very, very nice of her. And I would just say is that she really did focus on giving business to local, and I really appreciate that opportunity. But now, fast forward, and I've been able to see her growth at the same time and all the exciting things. If it's manning a boat in Castine, or not Castine, but all the way down east, guarding a Navy ship in the middle of the night, to doing some amazing things. I would just say she's a captain, a guide, an EMT, an entrepreneur, and bringing decades of safety experience from the sea to the Midcoast. Please welcome Lindsey Pinkham, owner of Midcoast First Aid.
Good morning.
Good morning. All right. Well, we're going to jump right in here, and just to our listeners, I would just say it is so important to be able to share somebody's journey, especially in a field that is dominated by men. And this is really, really awesome to be able to see. And, obviously right now, we probably have young women as well, some girls that are, being inspired by people like you, Lindsey. And I'm just really excited for us to be able to dive in and really get, for our listeners and our viewers, which you can listen to this on WRFR's Radio 93.3, or you can live stream. Or you can watch us on Facebook Live as we are right now. And then later on today, it will be on YouTube as well. So tell us a little bit about your background. How did Maine Maritime Academy share, basically like share your path? Like, let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, I grew up in Booth Bay Harbor, and I remember going to camp actually in Castine, and I fell in love with the town and Maine Maritime. And I saw that great big ship in the harbor and had grown up on boats, and remember going, that looks like a really cool place. I should check that out. And fast forward to senior year of high school, and really thought I wanted to be a marine biologist, but didn't know exactly. And I went up and did a tour and realized about the Marine Transportation Operations Program and going to sea, and said, that's what I want to do. I applied and got early acceptance, and didn't apply to any other colleges after that because I was so excited.
Wow.
When I started, I didn't quite realize that there would only be 8 women in my class of 212 of us in the regimental program. I did the 4-year program and was in the regiment for all 4 years, which included 2 training cruises and a co-op. My sophomore year, I jumped on a plane, went to the Columbia River, and worked for the Army Corps of Engineers for 90 days all by myself. And came back, and I can say it made me grow. And it's a great school that fosters education, but leadership, and really shows you what's out there in the world. When you
Mhm.
get out of Midcoast Maine, when you break that bubble and expand your horizons. And I graduated from Maine Maritime in 2004 and jumped right on a ship. Next thing I knew, I was in Singapore taking on
Wow.
fuel. Got done that job and came home and took a job right here in Maine on the Maine Responder down in Portland that's no longer there. And 3 weeks after that, Hurricane Katrina hit, and I was put on a plane and went to New Orleans for 8 weeks at a time doing oil spill cleanup and disaster relief for the company.
Well, there. No, I mean, I know that you had, when you had shared your bio with me, you know, I know that you've shipped all around the world. And what was it like being the designated person in charge of medical? Like, let's talk a little bit about that because that's where your specialty is, right?
Well, it kind of is. When I was on my second ship, we had a bad accident happen, and I was the medical person in charge on board, and thought I can do this, and realized, wow, there's a lot more to this. And I
Mhm.
actually went back to SMCC and did the paramedic program.
Oh,
I I didn't finish getting licensed because I went back to sea, but I did get that knowledge
yeah.
and have used that throughout my career. But that definitely built some confidence. But it's kind of eerie when you're 40s at a port halfway across the Pacific Ocean and somebody comes to you and they've just cut their fingers off in the machine shop. So you
That
learn.
was an experience.
That was an experience.
Crash course. Here you go.
Here you go. Yeah, there's no, stitching somebody's head up because they fell down a passageway in a storm. So
So, all right. So that's kind of like my next question.
yeah.
Like, let's talk about some of those intense moments. You know, so that's obviously that's got to be like top the cake. Or have you had even more experiences? Like, how does that? So, share some of those experiences.
Okay.
But how did it build your character and your experience and led to some of the things that we're going to today?
Well, it made me realize that I had more in me than I ever thought I did, and inspired confidence. I was in my 20s when I actually started Midcoast First Aid because I realized, hey, maybe someday I will want to come home and have a family and a normal life. Because through the first part of my 20s, I was gone for 4 to 8 months a year. And one day you're, sailing across the Pacific, and then they may change your billet, and you've got to jump on a plane and go to Europe to pick up another ship. And it was great, and I'm glad I had those experiences. But there were things, for example, it was the middle of the night and we came up on a sailboat that had been demasted. We hailed them on the radio. We couldn't get them. I was not captain. I was the mate then. The captain put myself and two people in a boat, and we had to go over and see if there were people alive.
All
People
I think of is
deceased.
Jaws. That's all I think of is
Yeah.
the floating boat.
Yeah, it was kind of like the Jaws thing, and it's this middle of the night. We did find out after we got there, got the vessel number. We called the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard had medevaced them off, but that was eye opening. What would have happened if they had been injured and we had to get them into a small boat back onto a 600-foot ship and maintain them till the Coast Guard got there? It's an ever changing world. You have a fire. We all think, oh no, our house is on fire. You call the fire department. When you're 300 miles offshore and you have a piece of oil line blow and start a machinery fire, it's your crew and you that have to take care of that. And if you don't, you're getting in a little rubber raft in the middle of the ocean. So you learn to adapt and overcome very quickly.
So I know that you had mentioned the Hurricane Katrina,
Yeah.
but also let's talk a little bit about your experience with Deepwater Horizon.
So I was actually teaching a class because I was in my off time when the Deepwater Horizon happened back in April of 2010. And the company I worked for at the time, Marine Spill Response Corporation, which was the biggest oil spill cleanup company, immediately activated all of us. And I went down to the Gulf. I got there about 4 days after it happened. And there was just oil. And you could still see fires on the rig, what was left of it at that point. And I spent over 2 months there booming off oil, working with our cleanup people, the wildlife rescue people, to try and contain it until they got the oil flow stopped.
So let's just talk a little bit about that. So what happens to oil? Is it just is there a cleaning process? Can it be reutilized? Like, how does that usually work?
Actually, about 90% of what we clean up is reused. We have skimmers that go across the top of the water after we boom it off.
Yeah.
We then pump it using high-tech machinery now, much different than what we had in '04, and it goes into barges. We take it back to a refinery. Sometimes it has to be refined, but depending on the product, some of it goes right back into tanks, and it gets settled out. The water gets pumped, and it's completely usable. So
Wow.
what we recover, 90% of it is reusable oil.
That's incredible. So with all this experience, the medical care, and so this obviously created that little spark. When we talk to entrepreneurs on this show, there's always that moment in time that creates like a little spark, like a little fire inside you. It's like, I could make this into a business. So when was that moment? Can you just talk about, like, when did you realize that this, you know, these experiences, that this could actually be helpful to others, and I could actually start a business?
Well, I think it had to have been where I came upon an accident, and everyone thinks when you call 911, they're going to be right there. And they are most of the time. But how many EMTs and ambulances do we have in the state of Maine compared to the number of people that we have in the state of Maine? You know, if we're here in Rockland, we call, they'll be here in 5 to 10 minutes, realistically. What happens if you're up in Portage Lake camping and something goes wrong? How long is it going to take for them to get to you? And I realized that we have this false sense of security that I lost very quickly because I was the person. If I couldn't fix it, there was nothing else to do. So I also had an experience where I watched my father go into cardiac arrest and did CPR on my own father and realized if I hadn't known that, he probably would not have survived. So I kind of made it my mission to educate people and train people. And I got hooked up with some wonderful people that helped me foster that. Sarah Hudson, who was a role model of mine, who taught ship's medicine at Maine Maritime, who was an EMT, that kind of guided me through this beginning of my career, told me if you want it, you can do it. And she's the one that got me into becoming a CPR instructor even way back when I was in college.
Wow.
And I continued to grow on that. And then I've made some great connections. You know, people don't realize every 72 seconds someone goes into sudden cardiac arrest and doesn't make it in this country. But if more people knew CPR, we had AEDs more readily available. If you get an AED and CPR within the first minute, your chance of survival is actually 90%. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
You put it to use that you saved your father. That
yeah.
That is incredible. So obviously this is that spark that you had, and you launched Midcoast First Aid back in 2007. Is that right?
That is right.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that.
That was a very scary experience because I never thought I would start my own business. When I graduated from Maine Maritime, I was going to ship out and be a captain for the rest of my life, and that was it. But I said, well, there's a need. I saw people wanted to learn CPR. There wasn't enough instructors. I definitely knew I had some skills that were much broader than most people have. So I rolled the dice and read a lot of books, and there wasn't the internet resources and places to go to get help than to start a business. So I kind of made a lot of phone calls, talked to some people, and applied for a business charter and did all of that on my own, and kind of started really small. And well, maybe I'll teach a couple classes. And then in about 2010, I really took off and said, I can do this, and got a lot of help and went through the SBA and took some classes.
Okay.
And yeah, it was
Awesome.
a great resource. And they, in the women's business networking program, definitely helped me go on the right track and teach me about what I needed to do and grow my business.
That is such an important lesson for entrepreneurs, is that we talked before the show, right, about how people sometimes feel alone, and sometimes they just put it on their shoulders, and they can make a lot of mistakes. And listen, as an entrepreneur, you cannot be afraid to make a mistake, right? I mean, that's how lessons are learned, and that's how you grow and adapt.
Oh, absolutely. I've made many, and you grow from them. I've had a couple failed businesses besides Midcoast First Aid. So if you don't fail once, you're never going to succeed.
This is true. So so you decided Maine is where you wanted to have this business. Now, did you start in your home, or did you start like where you are today?
I started working out of my grandfather's wood shop in Boothbay because that was the only space I had. I was living with my grandmother at the time my grandfather had passed, and I was shipping for 7 months a year. So when I was home, I, filled in the gaps doing that. I used to use the Boothbay Fire Station to do a lot of my
Okay.
classes. They were very helpful. The Boothbay Harbor Town office, places like that where I could teach small classes and get my name out there. And then I can't remember what year I moved up to Warren, and I was teaching at Maine Maritime, and actually met up with an old business partner. Met him then, and he took me on, and I started teaching classes for him, and he helped me build the business. And back in 2015, I bought my office building in Thomaston, and really took off and started to expand things. So, and here we are now. I'm opening a showroom in June and having a grand relaunching. So
Really? Okay, that is awesome. So Lindsey, what your clientele? Let's just talk about like who is your target client?
my target clients are businesses that require CPR and first aid, advanced first aid, wilderness first aid, the bloodborne pathogens training. And also, what we do is we go in, and if you don't know how to write your OSHA bloodborne pathogens plan, or you don't know how to do an emergency response plan, we go in and do that. We do a full site assessment, get you trained up, get your plans written, help you get the equipment, go back and do training. Any AED or equipment I sell like that, annually I come and do an inspection, make sure everything's working right, and continue to help you progress and make sure all that equipment and training is where it needs to be.
Wow.
Primarily, I started focusing on the maritime industry because that's what I knew, boat yards, marinas. And now I've grown out, I'm down at a power plant teaching classes and doing safety planning. I'm at places like industrial plants, power mills, things, power plants and things like that.
Yeah.
So,
So I'm just going to take a step back, all right? Just because I think it's really important because kids are making their pathway, especially the ones that are listening to the show. So when you went to Maine Maritime, which is an amazing school, a good friend of mine, Sean Varney, went there.
he was in my class.
Oh, was he? All
Yeah.
right, Sean, hopefully you're listening. Lindsey says hello, I'm
Yeah.
sure. So, but so many great people that we know, you and I both know that went to school. So what made you go regimented versus the other route? Is there really a choice for that?
When I went, it was a much different choice.
Okay.
They have many more majors, and the school is much different. When I went, about 70% of the school was regimented.
Okay.
And for the major I wanted, which was to get my unlimited third mate, you had to be in the regiment or you couldn't take the program. You were only able to get your, I believe it was 200-ton license after 4 years if you didn't do the regiment. I also looked at it as, it looked like a unique experience because the training crews looked like so much fun. And then I really doubted it about 3 weeks before I went. But then once I got there, I realized the camaraderie and the friendships, and I made friends that I still have today and talk to all the time.
Mhm.
And it really did build a bond. But also, you don't realize how much the structure can really help. And I'm not so sure I would have done as well academically or gotten through college if it wasn't for the structure and discipline and camaraderie that the regiment gave me.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. And tell me about that final cruise. That everybody, the picturesque. You're on a big boat and you're gone.
Yeah, picturesque. We were. It was great. You're realizing this is my last time that I'm not going to have a license in hand. So if I'm going to screw up, I better do it now because it's someone else's license. But I will never forget. We went over to the Canary Islands, and then we were coming through the English Channel, and we actually had a catastrophic emergency where we threw the number 5 piston up through the main engine and went dead ship in the English Channel and limped home. We were supposed to go to Halifax, then Boston, then Portland. We actually took us 3 weeks to get home, straight to Castine on half the main engine. But it was definitely a learning experience when it made me realize we are very small fish in a very big pond. When you think, oh, we're on this 500-foot ship and all of this, and the next thing you know, there's a bang and it shakes and all the lights go out and you stop moving and you realize, oh no, Toto, we're not in Kansas anymore. And to
I
come
can
back.
just imagine every movie that you've ever thought of,
Oh, yeah.
you're in it.
I mean, the Poseidon Adventure was always my favorite movie, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, then you realize how small you are out in that great big ocean.
So, in the second segment here, what I'd like to do is I'd like to do a little bit deeper dive into the Midcoast First Aid, your business. Um, so how has the Midcoast First Aid evolved? I know that you talked a little bit about it at first, right, and how you started small,
Yep.
but let's talk about the evolution of where it is today, where you're going to have this new showroom, and
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, it was kind of always just my side job until about 2016, 2017, where it became what I really wanted to do. And I still had to work another job because I couldn't support myself alone just on that. But I continued to grow, get more course approvals so that I could teach more classes, get my name out there more, really start networking, going to more business functions, the business after hours and things like that, and making connections and growing the business. Then, unfortunately, COVID happened. And I actually got a very, very lucky break during COVID that a gentleman out of New York who is the sales representative for all of the East Coast for Stryker medical equipment contacted me and saw what I was doing and wanted to bring me on as a sales representative for all Stryker equipment. So, of course, it was COVID. Everything was done remotely. But he really set me up. I was able to attend digitally the Great Big Sales Conference that is usually held in Las Vegas, Nevada, and learn about the products, and was set up to start selling LifePak AEDs, cardiac monitors, all the heart sign products, Lucas products, and many others. And that's really, I was able to tack that on when I was teaching a class that not only do we teach it, but we sell this and we offer these service plans. And that definitely was like holding the match to the fire that really lit it and led me to expanding the business to where I have now. Because one of the unique things that I do is if you buy an AED from me, you get 3 free CPR and first aid classes, so you can bring 3 of your employees in to do the training.
Wow.
And I go in with an in-service for all employees and do that. So then I was building on that and took some classes on how to really, I had done safety planning on the ships and I'd done it for companies I'd worked for, but fine-tuning how to write these safety plans, what needs to be in them, becoming really familiar with OSHA regulations, the Code of Federal Regulations, the state laws on what needs to be in these types of documents, where a lot of companies don't realize what needs to be in them, how they need to be, what they need, until unfortunately something happens and the wolves are knocking at the door, as I say.
So, and this is a typical Maine story, right? Is that Maine is not an easy place to do business.
No.
Especially when we're going through a pandemic like we did, where we were experiencing like a lot of shutdowns more than others, but still it was such an odd time. We talk about all time and how quickly, snap of a finger, it is over. But it was like 3 years of our life, maybe a little bit longer. I mean, it was, but what we've talked about so many times, the Maine entrepreneur is so known for being the hustler. Like, you're hustling because you're like, I'm not going to lose this business, and I'm going to evolve. I'm going to pay the bills, and we're going to weather the storm. You know, and I'm sure that takes a lot of guts to be able to do that.
I mean, I became a pro at Zoom and
you're on mute.
Yeah, you're not on. I've said that more than once. You know, but that definitely, you know, I was lucky that I could adapt like that, where a lot of businesses like restaurants and things couldn't really adapt like that. But it definitely made you have to really think and hustle. What am I going to do? You know, can I keep this going? How am I going to pay the bills? You know, so what's next? How do I do the next thing that's going to keep me going?
Yeah. So when you, you know, with your business, so a lot of people sometimes will get into a trap where they'll say, oh, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this. The next thing you know, you're doing many offerings, and sometimes that may water your stuff down a little bit. So I know that you have been evolving. So can you talk a little bit about where some of those decisions where maybe you had to like slow down one particular focus and gain more focus in somewhere else? I think you talked a little bit about that with with the sales position, but for the business, was there anything that's evolved that you offer now that you didn't before, or things that you've taken away?
Well, there's some classes that I mean, I still have them offered, but I used to offer them all the time. And I get one or two people. And I realized that's not really what people are looking for. And I always say the market here in Maine is very cyclical. It goes in a cycle where there's everybody wants this, then everybody wants this, then everyone wants this. So it's kind of adapting to that. There's the tried and true, everybody needs CPR first aid. That's always going to be at the forefront, but adapting to what's coming. So like right now, with new EpiPen regulations for camps and schools to be able to administer those, I went out and made sure I got that class, and I'm marketing that to say, we have this, where during COVID, wilderness first aid was something everybody wanted because they were outside. That's kind of taken a back burner. And it's more paying attention to the surroundings and the market. Where are people at right now? We just got certified to do the Stop the Bleeding training for mass casualty incidents, which nobody here in Maine wants to think about, but the incident in Lewiston absolutely showed it can happen here. So I think if you're going to run a successful business, especially in Maine, you need to be very aware of the surroundings, what's going on in your hometown, what's going on in the state, what's going on nationwide, and be one step ahead of your competitor. Be ready to maybe roll the dice on something that, well, this could pay off, but it might not. But if you don't roll the dice once in a while, you're never going to get ahead.
So true. So true. So tell us a little bit about this new showroom.
So I'm finally at a point at my office in Thomaston. I'm turning what used to be the lobby into a showroom where I'll have AEDs, medical equipment. But this year I also found a need for people go out and buy these first aid kits. So you go buy, for example, for your boat, a Coast Guard approved first aid kit. And you open it up and it's all in these cute little boxes and there's really not much in there. Or you go on Amazon and you buy this first aid kit for hundreds of dollars, and then you open it up and you don't know how to use half the stuff in it, and half of it's not really anything you'd ever need. So what I have done is come up with customized first aid kits. I have a marine line, I have an outdoor line, and then I have one for just the, you want to throw it in your car so you have something. But instead of putting all the, as I call it, fluff in there, there's truly just the things you need. For example, one thing I always people laugh at me about, the number one thing that you need in a first aid kit, especially around here, is a hat. Because hypothermia is a factor 365 days a year because we have that great big Atlantic Ocean. I have never pulled anybody out of the ocean that said, I planned on falling overboard today. You lose, 50 to 70% of your body heat out the top of your head. But nobody thinks something as simple as putting a hat on somebody if they're cold can absolutely save their life and keep them from going into shock. So
smart, yeah.
I've built first aid kits that are, from my experience, what you really need. People are like, oh, there's no tweezers in there. I've never once in an emergency situation needed a pair of tweezers. Have I needed gauze? Have I needed, bandages, things like that, triangular bandages, stuff like that? Absolutely. So I've made these first aid kits that are very user friendly. Not a lot of equipment. Don't need a lot of training to use them.
All right. That's really smart because you're right. Like you open that up and it's like, why am I going to need all of that? Like I need some of it. And then these little tiny Band-Aids, like what's the purpose? Like what is that? But anyway, because you probably don't need first anyway. But I think that's really, really awesome. So that'll be open to the public and you'll have public hours and so people can come in and buy their first aid kit and their so what was the device called? You said ED?
Automated external defibrillators.
Okay.
They're what somebody goes into cardiac arrest, you put it on and it delivers a shock and it puts their heart back into a sustainable rhythm. They're everywhere in the community, which they should be. Police cars have them, fire trucks have them, schools have them. We always say CPR is the stopgap measure. We need to do the CPR till the AED gets there.
Okay.
and they have saved numerous lives. So I'll have demo models there of all the
Yeah.
AEDs that we sell. Um,
That's awesome.
and
That is,
we'll obviously continue to teach classes.
of course, yeah. So you mentioned the Maine Women's Network, which is an amazing organization. Your you know walks of all lives are in that group, which is awesome. And when you're building your business and evolving, how important is it to have that network? Because I'm sure that you had to find people to support your business, and so when you were out there networking, why was that so important to you? Because for some particular reason, Lindsey, networking is turned into this dirty word. But if you don't network, you are A, going to be alone. B, you don't. Everybody says this little thing of shop local, right? Well, how's someone going to know how to shop local if you don't network with them, and vice versa, right? So share that experience and why that was so important to you.
Well, I can say I was given a word of advice when I graduated from Maine Maritime that if you're ever having a problem with a job or you don't know what to do, reach out to your fellow alumni. And I was told you'll never walk into an alumni meeting jobless and walk out without a job if you try. And that is a very true statement.
Wow.
So I took that to heart, and when I was struggling in business and didn't know what to do, it was actually I went to an alumni meeting and was telling all the guys about this business I was starting and handed out a few cards, and then one of them's daughter approached me. Oh, I go to this women's network in Portland. You should come with me. So I went with her and realized what a great opportunity it was. Then I started to go to chamber events and other networking events and realized, wow, word of mouth, especially here in Maine, will get you everywhere.
Mhm.
You can, buy all the advertisement you want and have all the flashiest signs you want. But if people don't know your story, you, and your name, you're never going to make it
Right.
in business here. And I can't say enough for young people. Yes, it's scary to walk into that room for the first time and walk up and introduce yourself to people.
Yeah.
But if you're an event like that, people want that. I actually feel flattered when younger people come up and ask me, how did you do it? How did you start your job? How did you build your business?
Yeah. So powerful.
And I'm sure you feel the same way when people ask you that.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I just gave a presentation last week about the Rock Coast entrepreneurs and the evolution of some of these networking groups is that people just don't see the value of them. And I think it's because people have the wrong mindset when they go into a networking event, such as a business after hours or one of the events for the Maine Women's Network, is that if you go with the intention, well, how much business can I get out of this meeting? It's a number one. People are going to see that as your motive is for the wrong things.
Right.
But if you go in there to build relationships, like I'm hearing from you, right? You're meeting some amazing people. You probably built some tremendous friends and support partners, but also too, your alumni. That's your network. You have past mentors that are very influential for you. And what happens is that givers gain mentality, which is something that like B and I would talk about, and that is where if you go in to understand what people do and find out how they can help your customers, and you build that trust and that confidence in those connections, and next thing you know, you go to your customer and say, hey, I know X, Y, and Z, and they can help you with X, Y, and Z. And next thing you know, the customer is ecstatic from you, and you didn't get anything from that except for the most important thing is a very, very happy and loyal customer, but also you just gave someone business for the right reasons. It's a solution based, there you go, have a wonderful day. And next thing you know, you do that, and we also call it karma, right? So it will come back twice fold sometimes, but if you just focus on being a good person, build a network, and have good intentions, networking is a wonderful, wonderful thing. So I hope that people take that from this because, I know that that is very important to you as well. What I'd like to do is I'd like to go, with the next segment, which is leading with a purpose. I just say, your community involvement is incredible. You have strong leadership, but I also want to talk a little bit about, what's next for that for you as well. Now, you've served on the Maine Pilotage that I said it correct, right?
Maine Pilotage Commission.
Yep, commission since 2021, and now you're the administrator. So what does that role involve? What do you do?
So now, I for a couple more months, I'm still on the committee as a member, but now I do all the paperwork and liaison with the state for the commission. What the Maine Pilotage Commission does is we oversee all the licensed pilots in the state of Maine. By federal regulation, every state has the right to monitor and regulate their own waters, and that's what the pilots do. We have 3 pilotage groups here in Maine, down east, here the Penobscot Bay, and then Kennebec and Portland, which are kind of combined into one. And we have 10 licensed pilots that I oversee. I give the tests. Right now, we're dealing with a lot of legislative issues with some bills that are coming up that want to change regulations that could affect the waterways. So I'm working closely with the Maine DOT, the pilots, and to, go to the legislature and give our opinions and try and make the right decisions for Maine and stay at the forefront of what we do so that we never have an incident like happened at the Keys Bridge.
Gotcha. It's please don't judge me, okay? But when I was down at Key Bank, down in Booth Bay, I had this sweet gentleman who was a pilot, and he was telling me about his, and he was just telling me, and he said he's a pilot, and all I could think of is the air, right? So next thing you know, he's like, yeah, and I get to test out I'm gonna be driving the brand new
Arleigh.
yeah, and he says it's pretty crazy, I just navigate this thing, and then they put me in a hidden room or just basically lock him away, basically for his protection. I'm sure he should not know some of the things that they're testing, and I was like, wait a second, time out. Like I honestly I had no idea, but how awesome is that? But these waters are not friendly, especially if you do not know. So can you tell us a little bit how important pilots are and what pilots do?
Yes.
For our listeners?
Absolutely. Pilots are brought on for their local knowledge of the area. So to become a state licensed pilot, here in Maine, you have to have a captain's license. You actually have to pass the federal pilotage test. So if you wanted to be a pilot for Penobscot Bay, you need to be able to draw the 3 major charts from memory. They give you 6 landmarks on each chart, and you have to draw it completely from memory. Once you get your federal pilotage,
Wow.
You then can apply to one of the 3 pilotage groups to get an apprenticeship. If you are selected, you then apprentice for anywhere from 3 to 7 years before you get enough trips, you get the knowledge that you can then apply to come take the state test. And if you pass the state test, then you can become a pilot. And any foreign vessel coming into Maine waters has to have a pilot. Any vessel over 263 feet, any certain regulations, but pretty much any foreign vessel, anything over 263 feet, anything over a certain tonnage, all have to have a pilot. So every time you see one of the, Irving oil tankers coming in, or the cruise ships or anything, we have to put one of our pilots on there to safely navigate them in and out of the waters of Maine.
And I've seen some of the videos, and we have a gentleman that's in Rotary who was a pilot in New York Harbor for a long time, and he shared some pictures, and it's like these pilots, when they have to board these boats, I mean, they're doing it by helicopter, they're doing it by small boats and like massive seas, and they're climbing up a tiny little rope ladder sometimes.
When I was working out on the Columbia River, I actually got heloed on once with the first female pilot and the first woman to graduate from Maine Maritime. Deb Dempsey is a friend of mine, and I was a cadet, and she let me go pilot ships with her on the Columbia River for a day. And it was an experience like none other.
Wow.
And then I have been out here and rode ships with the pilots, going off Monhegan at 2 a.m. when it's rocking and rolling, or even climbing up a pilot ladder when the boat's anchored here can be a challenge, because you're looking at some vessels, it's 10 feet, some vessels, it's 30 feet. If you've got car carrier, it can be upwards of 60 feet. You're climbing straight up that ladder.
Goodness. Yeah, that's a long ways up and a long ways down.
The
I'm
whole
so
key
sorry.
is not to let gravity kick in and fall.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
bet. So, what keeps you grounded as a business owner and public safety advocate? Because, I mean, there's a lot of responsibility and a lot of need for what you do. So, how do you keep yourself grounded?
I have to take time for me. There is that time when you say you
Mm,
got to put all the responsibility of, being on the Pilotage Commission, all the responsibility of being a business owner, and I need to put me first.
okay.
Go for a hike. My dogs are my biggest grounding thing. When, I always chuckle. The one good thing that came out of COVID is you get to work from home. When things get stressful, I go out and play with the dogs for a while and come back in. But everybody has to find that thing, or
Hmm.
you can go into a really dark place. And I've seen a lot of people lose their businesses and because they can't stay focused. And
Yeah.
I think everybody at a point in time when you own a business has that time when you're like, can I do this? Things might not be going right in your personal life, things maybe not right in the world, and you really doubt it, and you got to keep yourself out of that bed headspace and
Yeah.
just keep moving forward. But find that one thing that when all else fails, you take that time for you and you do what makes you grounded.
It's so funny you bring that up because you and I talked before
Yeah.
the show about, that's one of the biggest trends is that so many entrepreneurs, people in authority, sometimes they are alone. And it's so important to be able to find that balance, that work-life balance, but also to keep yourself engaged and challenged, and but also keeping yourself in check, which is sounds exactly what you do. What do you wish more businesses and organizations knew about preparedness?
I wish that I see people have knee jerk reactions.
Hmm.
They have that can't happen to me mentality. And I will say that had disappeared from my life very, very early. Unfortunately, I've lost a numerous amount of friends from Maine Maritime to very bad shipping accidents.
Hmm.
And that really opened my eyes to, wow, this can happen to anyone at any time.
Yeah.
And I always try and emphasize to people, you don't want me coming in after OSHA's been there because you need me to do everything. You want me there before, so you're prepared. And, I always point out the places that are prepared and follow the protocols, I don't see the accidents there.
Mm.
But for example, I had a horrible ambulance call about 15 years ago where it was an industrial site and a gentleman had been burned very badly. And they said, we're in building number 6. Well, here it is, the middle of February, a snowstorm, and there's 12 buildings, and they all, I'm sure if you work there every day, you know which building that is. And we delayed our care for about 10 minutes trying to find the right building.
Mm.
And that gentleman ended up, having to be, it didn't have a positive outcome. I can't say that 10 minutes would have made that much of a difference, but could it have, So I say, one of the big mottos I have at the company, I want you to go home to your loved ones like I go home to my loved ones at the end of a day.
Right.
And if you're not prepared when an emergency happens, you're putting not only whoever's injured, but your life at risk. Because how many people that aren't prepared see, oh my God, so and so just fell on the shop floor, and they run over and they don't realize it's because there was ungrounded machinery or a toxic gas or something even worse, where there's someone with a weapon or something like that.
Very, very good, positive,
Yeah.
but scary. I would say positive, but such an important message for people
Yeah.
to hear and really take that advice.
And the other thing is too, it's never too young. I just did a CPR class, first aid class, where I had kids as young as 12,
Hmm.
14, 16 that wanted the training. So, the parents come with them, and I'm happy to see that a younger generation is maybe learning, and wants to be proactive.
Yeah.
So I think fostering that in a younger generation is absolutely key.
I think this next generation was going to surprise a lot of us. And I'm sure that our parents probably said the same thing about our generation and the generation before that. But I'm seeing more and more kids being called to service and, a calling to be able to help others. And that's really, really positive to hear that. So, just wanted to just dive in a little bit more into the whole network. So how do you network and connect with complementary professionals in your industry? So like, what are some of the things that you do?
Well, I'm a member of like the Maine Marine Trades Association, local business groups, staying involved with things like the Maine Maritime Alumni, reading trade. I know people don't like to read now, but reading trade magazines, articles, staying on the forefront of what's going on in the industry and in your surroundings. And I think, how many people pick up the newspaper and read it anymore? I remember my grandparents having the paper delivered every morning, and we'd read the paper and know exactly what was going on.
Yeah.
But you've got to be aware of what's going on, not only in your town, in your communities, in the state, um, because if you're not aware of what's going on and reaching out to the right people or knowing what's coming, how can you be the best at your business? And making connections. There are people that even to this day, I'll be like, I don't know what to do. I have those people that I can reach out to that I've had for years that always maybe don't have the right answer, but can guide me and at least point me in the right direction. And I think everyone establishing that kind of network, especially if you're going to be in business, is so very important.
One of the things that Maya talked about in that presentation last week is the importance of keeping your network fresh, because sometimes your partners of today will not be your partners for tomorrow, and that's because that's called evolution. And sometimes businesses and partners don't they don't evolve, they don't have the right mindset, and they may not grow with the same intensity and and focus that you may be doing that. So how do you keep that fresh? Like, do you go to the same groups over and over and over again? Like, what do you do?
So, for example, I went to, and I don't remember the name of the women's networking group that I went to last week, but it's a group of women here just on the coast that I had never heard of their group. A friend told me about it, and they were having a meet and greet, so I went, and I met many new faces that I had never seen before. I gave out a ton of cards, got a ton of cards, met a woman who sells insurance in Gardner that has need for me up there, where I never would have made that connection. And now I'm going to meet with her next week to help some of her clients out because she was looking for someone that had the services I have. So it's getting out of that area. I'm going to the Propeller Club meeting in Portland in a couple weeks. I haven't been in a few years, to reach back out and see what's new and reconnect. So it's great to have your standbys where you always go, but you've got to be, get out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
I went to Waterville to a business after hours in the fall. Made some great connections. Would have, never thought about doing it, but a friend who owns a business up there was like, hey, come with me. So I went and ended up getting some great contacts and, some work out of it. So.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I would just say is, I'm just going to tell you right now that we are bringing back business after hours in this area. We're going to, most likely it's going to probably start in June. We were hoping to start it next month, but I think we just need a little time. So I hope that you'll be there, but also too, you should do a ribbon cutting for your new showroom. That'd be a really cool idea. I'm not sure if you're doing that or not.
I have not thought about it, but I definitely would.
So let's coordinate. I'll get the Rock Coast entrepreneurs there and some of the other groups, and let's celebrate what you're doing, because that's a really, really cool thing. So what's the vision for your business in the next 3 to 5 years?
And in the next 3 to 5 years, I would like to actually expand to do more of the OSHA type trainings.
Okay.
Because there's a need for it, and I know WorkSafe does it and things like that. But there's a lot of great trainings. I went to a national conference last year where I got some really great ideas and some great training that I'd like to bring to this area. But I'd also like to bring awareness that basic things like CPR and AEDs save numerous lives. Many people think about, in today's day, the football player in the NFL that went down and they saved him. The NFL has pledged millions of dollars right now for training and getting AEDs out to children and things like little league teams and stuff like that. So I'm really looking to expand that part of the business and get more children trained. I had an experience, a friend of mine from high school collapsed in the Booth Bay Region YMCA gym playing basketball, It was a 10-year-old kid that saw it on TV that grabbed the AED off the wall and brought it in.
Mm.
So I think that I really want to focus on getting the younger generation trained and making the community a safer place.
That's awesome. Well, I can't wait to see your growth. I mean, you continue to do some great things. I know that your future is bright. So, one of my favorite parts of the show is my rapid fire wrap up question here. All right. So this is how our listeners and our viewers get to know you a little bit more deeply, and maybe judge you a little bit. I'm just kidding. No. So most used item in your own first aid kit.
Triangular bandage.
Triangle band. Okay. Life-saving skill everyone should learn.
CPR.
When's your next CPR course?
May 3rd at 8:30 in our Thomaston office.
Lindsey, Austin, if you're listening, you need that for your certification. All right. Sea or mountains?
See?
That's a no-brainer, right? But you never know.
Well,
You just never know. Favorite place in Maine to hike or guide?
North Maine Woods.
The Great
Way up
North,
in
huh?
the Great North.
All right. Let's see here. The most rewarding part of owning a business.
Knowing that what I do, it does for me. I'm not putting money in someone else's pocket, and if I don't like it, I'm the only one that can change it.
All right. CPR or wilderness first aid?
Wilderness First Aid.
Go to piece of safety equipment you always recommend.
A blanket.
It's so simple, but so important, just like that hat, right?
Yeah.
Most memorable training moment.
When I fell off the dock into the St. George River in the middle of a class.
Okay.
In March.
Burr.
Yeah.
Yeah. One word that describes Midcoast First Aid.
Evolving.
One thing you'd never leave home without.
A flashlight.
Okay.
Or a knife.
Nice. All right. All right. Do they make one that does both?
Yes, actually they do.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
The perfect tool.
Yeah.
All right. Lindsey, thank you so much for joining us today. Where can people find you online and take a class?
My website is midcoastfirstaid.com. We're also on Facebook, or you can swing by the office at 145 Main Street in Thomaston. Our phone number's right there on the door. If we're not right there, give us a call. So.
That's awesome. And we'll make sure that we have that on that YouTube link, as well as it'll be on the Facebook post when we put this back out. Any details on upcoming showroom, like the grand opening, the estimated date by chance?
Mid-June.
Mid-June. Okay.
Mid-June.
So stay tuned for that. And final message for entrepreneurs or businesses thinking about safety and planning.
Do it sooner rather than later, because you never know when you're going to need it. And it's one of those things that, we're going to do it. And then it gets swept under the rug because the busy season gets here or something else comes up. So don't put it off. You know, we have a very flexible schedule. We do free consultations to come into your workplace. So,
Isn't that funny how you said that? Is that they're coming, right? The busy season's coming for a lot of our small businesses in this area. And we always take that winter nap. And then all of a sudden we wake up and we're ready to go. And we usually do that with like 2 to 3 weeks before the rush gets here. Start early, plan ahead, and do this.
that's my busy season. We've got 2 to 3 weeks before, from
bet.
now until as the tourist season hits.
Yeah, awesome. I would just say is that, Lindsey, it was a pleasure having you on, and it's been fun to see you grow in what you do. And I can't wait for people to continue to learn more about what you do, but also how you impact the lives that they'll be able to save as well, which is really awesome.